Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Hiram Butler. This is The Goal of Life. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points of interest that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there are several playlists linked in the corner above, the box down below, along with the source material so that you can go back and get a better understanding of exactly why I stand where I do. A particular note again today is more than likely going to be the Unconventional Bible Study of 161 videos describing my removal of self from my faith of upbringing. With that being said, let us dive into the text and begin with chapter 10, Mind Centers. We read in Genesis that God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. We know that the image of a thing is the form, the general order, the construction, the external appearance of that thing. I want to go ahead and put in here that this is man's self-insertion, assuming that the God has the same body as him. I do not necessarily hold that view. With regard to the construction of matter, the opinion of some of the scientists is that it is constituted of centers of force. We talk about that quite often. Now, in considering the name Yahweh, we have presented reasons for believing that all force is by virtue of that which in human manifestation, or manifestation in connection with the human mind, is called the will. But the will, being simply a force acting in obedience to the thought, and thought being form and order, then, to the end that there may be order in any form, there must be a mind to direct the force. For in all nature's activity, order is the direct manifestation of mind. In other words, the existence of a center of mind activity implies an organization in which is embodied a will or power of action, and a mind to cause that action to maintain specific orderly arrangement. In all ages past, the order, precision, and limitless power manifested in the movement of the planets, suns, and systems of worlds have been the wonder of thinking men. But if, as we have concluded, all is mind and all is a product of the creative word, then we are compelled to recognize in all these activities of the universe the functioning of mind. See yonder shining world in space, flying with inconceivable velocity and obedience with the law that governs its every action to the utmost minutiae. Let us approach that world. As we near it, we behold green fields, beautiful gardens, extensive railroads and steamships, and magnificent irrigating systems. We hear the roar of millions of activities. Are they the activities of intelligent thinking beings? We carry with us an electric receiver, and as we draw still nearer, we listen to the tick-tick of that receiver, and lo, we find mind emanating from a people who communicate with each other through space and talk intelligently of their interests, their designs, and purposes. The nearer we approach them, the more we see that they are all governed by some definite law of action. While each individual seems intent on carrying out his own will and design, yet his will is interdependent upon that of his millions of associates. Thus, as one has said, no man liveth unto himself, for no man is independent of all other men, but every man, as a molecule in the great body of humanity, is dependent upon the thought and action of the entire body for his guidance, maintenance, support, and general integrity. As we view this beautiful world floating in space, we cannot but see that the ultimating laws and forces active therein are manifested in an intelligent thinking humanity, but we can but conclude that the world that has produced this humanity, this intelligence, must be a body of mind element. As we visit world after world and find in each great diversity, and yet great unity, inasmuch as they are all peopled with intelligent, thinking, acting, willing humanities, we can but conclude that the bodies of these humanities are mind centers, brought into manifestation by their controlling center, which holds in unity all its worlds, controls their every action, and keeps them ever revolving through space around itself, their governing center. These facts are at least suggestive of what Revelation brings to our mind in the declaration made in Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. In contemplating this text, we find it equivalent in this declaration. Let us create an additional mind center to be manifested among worlds, and let this mind center have dominion over its world, over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and over all the earth. Or, let this mind center be king, absolute, ruling the whole constituent of its planet, all nature below it. That is an extrapolation. We have concluded, from our understanding of scientific research, that there is order in everything, from the microscopic to the telescopic, and that every order, and that order, finds a definite law. Therefore, we may with very little difficulty discover in man the constitution of the whole body of humanity, he being composed of organs like, yet dissimilar to, the members of all organized life, a microcosm of the macrocosm. So each individual is a mind center, a mind organ, and when scientists conclude that the atom, or electron, may be but a center of force, shall we not add, may be a world in itself, a mind center. Sorry. But here we enter the realm of speculation, through the door of analogy, however. In a preceding chapter, we touched on the thought that Yahweh, the God of the universe, or of all universes, is spirit, and is the all-pervading formless former of all things. We shall now consider his image, which is seen in the unity of all organized life. Every organized form, all organized substance, from the most material to the most ethereal, is organized by thought and bears the likeness to its progenitor that the Son bears to his Father, and is not only the image and likeness of its Father, but is the embodiment and expression of its Father, being of the Father's life and mind and possessing his attributes, so far as the form is able to receive them. Thus, all manifest nature becomes the body of the infinite, becomes a mind center to express the thoughts of the thinking intelligence that pervades and interpervades all space, all worlds, and systems of worlds. If we accept as a fact, and how can we do otherwise, that all manifestations of life are mind organs of the infinite, then we find a vast field of interesting thought concerning the purpose of God in the creation of man in his image and likeness. From the foregoing, we infer that the whole universe is working together under one controlling will, working towards one general and well-defined object. And therefore, when God said, "Let us make man in our image and like us," it was, as it were, the infinite source of all formative law, finding intelligent expression in a mind center which was capable of thinking, knowing, and sending forth thought-forming power of such character and potency as to form a world, and cause that world to bring forth intelligent beings, who were to become its absolute rulers. But man, in order to possess this dominion, must have not only the image, but the likeness of his Creator. An extrapolation. Humanity, the image now existing on this planet, is the product of creative law, as is evidenced by his subordination to that law. But when the likeness is obtained, then will man no longer act blindly under the impulse of law, but he will have awakened to a state of knowing. This state of ultimate knowing was intimated by our Lord when he said to his disciples, "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends, for all things I have heard from my Father I have made known unto you." I feel you, brother. He here brings out the thought, dimly, it is true, that all organized life, man included, is under the absolute dominion of creative law, is a servant, is a mind center acted upon by that law without absolute volition, but with partial volition, limited by the organic qualities and the general form which govern the desires, loves, and sympathies, and consequently the decisions of the will. Thus, man is in the image of God, and as yet is a servant, controlled by a mind, a will, of which he knows comparatively nothing. That's true. And if our conclusion is correct, then man, by acting under the impulse of a higher intelligence, is being led through evolutionary processes towards the estate of a volitional, intelligent being. And if this law is universal, then it follows that the higher planets, the elder worlds, must have reached a point where the body politic is not only in the image of God, but has attained to a degree of his likeness, of his purity, of his comprehensive knowledge, and of his volitionary dominion over all below, is a mind organ for the infinite to fill. And our sun, at least in its physical manifestation, may contain a luminous humanity whose very bodies are a flaming fire, and who have reached such a degree of likeness to the Father as to have attained the right, through mental and spiritual unfoldment, to have dominion over all below them. And having this dominion over that which is below them constitutes them God. Exodus 7:1. And if the inhabitants of our father-mother world, the sun, are the gods of the world that they have created, then are not they in their turn the children of a higher world, of their parent sun? And thus, may we not see in the heavens the great spiritual nervous system of an individual man, having centers of mind beyond centers of mind, as in our physical structure, there being one center transcendently above all others, ruling all below it. For if we find from careful study of our own body that while we have a brain center, the head, from which all voluntary action emanates, yet there is another brain center. Some think it is the solar plexus, which governs all involuntary actions, such as digestion and tearing down and the rebuilding of the body. We're going to come back to this. And there is, in the experience of many, a consciousness of a mind center, transcendentally beyond this, so high, so spiritual, that probably no one has been able to fully comprehend or locate its power. I got you, fam. Hold on. Many have started out in search of the soul, but it has ever eluded them. And if in our own organism we find that which is transcendently beyond our comprehension, there may be worlds that have become so spiritualized as to be beyond the perception of worlds upon lower planes of existence. Therefore, in our contemplation of a universal law, we come to the conclusion that the words recorded in our Bible, "Let us make man in our image," etc., are eternal words, words that have been traversing the infinitude of space through all eternity and will continue to traverse it to all eternity, or so long as organic form finds expression, so long as the creative mind continues to form organized mind centers through which to express itself in some well-defined direction. For truly we see in nature that every organized form has what we call a specific character. Even among men we find that each man has his own peculiar character and sphere of use, the sphere wherein he is normal. Consequently, God, in his infinite purpose, is not creating worlds to float in space without a definite purpose, but every organized form is made to be a mind center, a mind organ of the infinite, through which to express some useful thought. And when man has awakened to a realization of his place in the universe, to the object of his creation, and has voluntarily united his will with the will of the All-Mind, and has complied with the laws of his being, then he will awaken to find God manifested in him, and to find also that the manifestation of God in him is one with the Spirit of the Infinite, manifested in all diversified character and form throughout the universe. There's a clue there. And so far as his organization and sphere of use make it possible, he will be enabled to know that all that is relative to his plane of existence, and recognizing his position as a mind organ of the infinite, he will realize the force of the words expressed by the Nazarene, "All authority hath been given unto me in heaven and on earth." But the full manifestation of this authority and dominion, this image and likeness, is obtained only through organization, correct formation in harmony with universal law. This organization we shall consider later on in the chapter, the Elohim, and elaborate on in the chapter, the eternal order of Melchizedek. The further formulate and elaborate in the chapters on the image of God and the likeness of God, and consummate in the image and the likeness. All right, I held my comments on purpose because I'm going to talk for just a minute. We talk here often about God, What is God? Who is God? God is. God is all. God is everything. God is me. God is you. And God is the space between me and you, and He is the space between me and you. He is everything you can touch and everything that you cannot. He is every breath and every thought. God is all. We are here through the express will of God. I do believe that. I believe that we are here voluntarily as individualized pieces of God, not any of us in and of ourselves divine, but each of us a tiny sliver of the divine. That includes this dog laying on the bed behind me. It includes the birds flying around my house. It includes the insects out in the grass, and it includes the grass itself. All of that is in the image of God. You may have a hard time with that concept, but I don't. I believe that God is everything, and that every single thing is here by the direct express will of God and created in His image. Everything serves its purpose, and for us, here on the fifth plane of existence, we are here to learn lessons. Now, Merlin right here, he's got a whole lot of easy lessons. He's got to learn how to control himself and not use the bathroom in the house. He's got to learn how to not get aggressive with other animals. He's got to learn how to be around people. All of that is concerned with being the best dog possible. The birds are out there gathering their food and nursing their young and doing the things that birds do. That is being the best bird possible. The grass is out here growing as tall as I will let it grow. That is being the best grass possible. And their lessons are lesser than ours. We have greater lessons because we are greater beings. But we all have lessons. And I do believe that those lessons are agreed to before we get here. We are taking part in a voluntary exercise here on this planet. We are being things that God necessarily can't. It is beyond grief for God, because God is eternal, and when we die, we just return to Him, and so He doesn't grieve our deaths. He can't really get all that happy about the things that we do because He is so much more capable. And so we come here to have those experiences, to learn lessons. And some of those lessons are wonderful and pleasant. You can meet the love of your life and live forever. Not forever. You can live for the entirety of your life together with someone who makes you happy. And some of those lessons are unpleasant. They include assault and theft and things of those nature. And while they are unpleasant, you are meant to learn something from them. And the main thing that you are to learn from them is how you respond to them. You are meant to overcome the trials of this life. One of the best ways that I have found in order to do that is to become more aligned with what God wants for you, to find your purpose and to enact it. The key that I have used to do that is to find the control over these centers. Now, there are three numbers that I talk about quite often: 1, 3, and 8. 1 is God. He is everything. We just talked about that. The 3 is the Trinity. It is manifest inside of you, right? It is the body, the thing that you pilot around this 5D space. It is the soul, the individualized piece of God that is here to learn the lessons, the part that makes the decisions. And it is the being, the becoming, or the Holy Spirit, however you like to think about it. It is the part that changes what is into what will be. It is the part that takes your food and turns it into fuel so that you can move. It is the part that when you decide you want to move, actually makes that happen. It keeps your heart beating, it keeps you breathing, it keeps all of the basic functions around when you aren't doing anything. But you can take a small bit of control of that. You can hold your breath. You can raise your blood pressure. You can run and get your blood pumping. You can lay down and get it to slow down. There, you can take a small measure of control of the becoming, of the being. That part, while outside of you, is something that you have access to. I believe that you have better control and better access when you have access to these centers. Now, he talks about the center in the mind, and he talks about the center in the solar plexus, but he is missing, 6 of them? There are 8 altogether. 7 internal, 1 external. They are as follows: the base, which is at the very bottom of your spine, really close to your butthole. There is the sacral, which is one step up. It is in the reproductive centers. There is the solar plexus, which is just below the heart. It's about your gut. It is the part that nourishes you. There is the heart. This is the part that binds together the lower, which we just did those three, and the upper, which is the three we're about to get to, into you. And when he was talking about the solar plexus, he was meaning more the heart than the solar plexus. He just didn't have the terminology for it. Next up is the throat. It resides, funnily enough, in your throat. It is the part that allows you to talk. It's around the point of your larynx, and it goes up to the point of your uvula. Next up is the third eye. The third eye is between these points, which is between your eye, and if you go to the back of your skull where it comes down to a point, and you draw a line, and then you come right here just above the ears, and between the ears and the temple right here, like this is the temple, this is above the ears, just about halfway, and you draw a line where that X meets. That's your pineal gland. That's where your third eye rests. It is about the size of your fist, and it is a projector in large part. Next up, the seventh one is your crown. It rests right here at the top, where the soft spot used to be. It extends partially in and partially out. It is where you receive the energy from above. There is energy above and below, and the two centers at the top and the bottom are your receptors for that. These, acting in concert, the three upper and the three lower, through your heart, manifest into the eighth one, which is the divine. This is referred to as the Merkaba to some people, the aura to other people. It depends on your definition on how you do it, but I call it the divine aura, right? It is the divine chakra. You have access to this one too. It is through these that you make manifestation happen. It is through deliberate alignment of these, the going through and picking apart the things that are holding you back so that you can get correct alignment in the seven. Then you can get access to the eighth, which is where manifestation happens. It happens in the space between the seven and the eighth. You are surrounded by it, but all of these energy centers are what he's talking about here. He just didn't have the terminology for it. I do. Now, you can take your awareness, right? The soul, the part that makes the decision, is your awareness. It is the part that is individualized for your 5D existence. You can take that part and you can move it up and down, all the way down to the base, all the way up to here, and even outside into the divine. You can do that. I know because I have done that. And I am not special, right? I am in the fact that I take the time. I have the dedication to do the prayer, fasting, and meditation to make it work. But other than that, I am no different than you. We are all created by God. We are all endowed by God with creative powers. The control systems, which in large part I am here to break apart, are holding you back from that. They are telling you that it is separate from you, and it is not. It is a God-given gift. It is something that you are supposed to have access to, and we have almost criminalized that in the face of religion, right? If you do the things that I am talking about in Christianity, they will shun you. They will kick you out. A couple hundred years ago, they would burn you. They would tie you to a chair and throw you in the river. They would have all kinds of tests to see if you were a witch, and they were all designed for you to fail. That is because you can overcome the limits of this world through this procedure. All of this is governed by the 8 laws of creation. When he's talking about the laws here, that's what he's talking about, even though he didn't have the terminology for it. I do. The 8 laws of creation are the governing factors in the world. It governs what you give out and how it comes back to you. It governs the steps that you should take in order to make manifestation happen in your life, to align yourself correctly and ensure that you are motivated correctly, because you can hurt yourself with these things. On the surface, that is why the control systems restrict them from you and they only give it to their initiates. But I'm not here for that. I am here to cast the pearls, and if you pick them up, then you are not swine. I think that covered everything that we needed to cover for that particular part. And we're going to go ahead and dive into this next one, which is the Elohim, which is the plural for God. So we're going to see what he says. Chapter 11, the Elohim. It was the Elohim that the Lord Jesus called his Father, and he made the astonishing statement that no man knoweth the Son, but the Father, neither knoweth any man the Father, save the Son, and he to whomever the Son will reveal him. Matthew 11:27. In the effort to reveal the Father, we necessarily assume to be the Son, which does not mean that we assume to have in mind the Lord Jesus Christ, who was here 1900 years ago. For the apostle declared the great truth. Now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear that we shall be. 1 John 3:2. And the Lord Jesus left on record the commandment, call no man your father upon earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 23:9. If we are to reveal to you the Father, it is because we have followed the leadings of the Spirit until the Father has revealed himself unto us. Everything I do is directly because of him. But that revelation to our soul cannot become knowledge to you. I can tell you my experience, I cannot give it to you, right? We talk about that all the time. We make the effort to reveal to you in words that which we have come to know as absolute truth, and you only obtain the knowledge of that truth by the knowledge of the Spirit. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. Romans 8:14. And the Son of God said 1900 years ago, if I should say, I know him not, I shall be like a liar unto you. John 8:55. Therefore, it behooves us to give you evidence from the scriptures of truth, which some of you hold dear. The very first utterance in the Old Testament is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The noun Elohim is the plural form, and it would have been correct had the sentence been translated. In the beginning, the gods created the heaven and earth. Some authorities have ingeniously tried to evade the consequences of a plural noun in this case by explaining that it is a plural of excellence. Others hold that it signifies a plurality of attributes or manifestations. But the fact stands out incontrovertibly that throughout is meant a plurality of individuals. And when we reach the 26th verse, we read that Elohim said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. That is true, but I hold some slightly controversial beliefs sometimes, right? I have a little bit of deviation from the norm. I do believe that there was some entities that took part in the crafting of us, right? There is no biological imperative for humanity to be as we are. We have discussed that before, but for instance, there is no reason why we should have lost the covering of hair that allowed us to be safe from the winter, and then have to make clothing to cover it, right? It is probable that whatever it was that made the alterations in us, which is definitely probably a thing, I'm not going to say for definite because I wasn't there, but the way that our DNA is arranged is a little bit different, right? The way that our brains are formed is a little bit different than this, even the more complicated animals like the one laying behind me. And so I do believe that there were some entities who had a part in that, and that when Genesis is recording the things that it is recording, it is taking from antiquity a lot of different stories and consolidating them into one narrative of how this one chosen people happened to be created and chosen. I don't believe that is correct. I know that is controversial. I have some unconventional beliefs, but I went through the Bible for a reason. There's 161 videos for a reason, and if you are more interested in that type of thing, you should definitely check it out because I'm not going to expound on it much more here. When it is talking about let us create him in our likeness, I believe it is the entity speaking. I do not believe that it was God. I believe that God is beyond the manifestation here, that he never walked the earth, right? And while men may have walked with their gods, plural, that it was not the God, the one true, holy creator and sustainer of all of the universe. I serve that God. I don't serve the entities. And there is a major distinction there, at least for me. The thought here is unquestionably that of a company of persons who says one, of whom one says to the others, let us do thus and so. It is not, I will make. We are not, however, presenting to you a plurality of gods, but a God organized of many members, therefore one God. In the Hebrew, let us make is a verbal form in the plural, emphasizing the conception of plurality quite as much as is done with the English. We are thus brought face to face with the language which images this picture to our minds. A plurality of gods, or personalities if you please, deciding upon a concerted work that is to be accomplished, and working together as one body, one man, for the accomplishment of the work agreed upon. This right here is, in great measure, what I talk about when I am talking about soul contracts. My theory, in case you have missed it in any of the other videos, is that we are here voluntarily. That before we were here, the soul being eternal, we were somewhere else. And that when we leave here, we will go somewhere else. And that is this, not this, right? You don't have a body in the after. Not this one anyway. Because you were somewhere else, I believe that we, all of us, made an agreement that we would learn things from each other. Now, in my belief, every single person that you have ever met and interacted with was here to teach you something. Some of those somethings are wonderful things. We just talked about that. And some of them are terrible things. But you are meant to have the experience of them and to respond to them in the appropriate manner. If something is terrible, you're not supposed to become terrible because of that, but rather you are supposed to overcome it. Just so y'all don't think I'm doing anything weird. I'm cleaning my glasses. And so we are meant to do something. Everything that you have ever experienced is leading you towards learning lessons. You have the option to not learn the lesson, but if you don't learn the lesson, then it will be returned to you a little bit harder because you agreed to learn it. And because you agreed to learn it, until you learn it, it will keep happening in your life to a greater degree upon every repetition until you get to the max level, right? That is part of the law of returns. And once you receive the max level, you get less likely to learn it, and you have to wait until the next incarnation to get it. I do believe that there are multiple incarnations, not necessarily of the same, like, I'm not sure that Jeremy will be exactly the same as he was this incarnation in the next one. I'm fairly positive I'm not the same as I was in the last one. But the individualized piece that is you will be back to learn new lessons. Now, the mechanics of that is beyond me, right? I'm not trying to tell you that I know for certain that this particular thing is happening, but it seems to be the most logical. It has aligned itself with the parts that have been revealed to me, right? The energy centers, that has been revealed to me. The soul contracts, to a greater degree, has been revealed to me. Not in a way like some people would require, like God himself said, this is the law. I don't necessarily think he acts like that. I think that we are meant to learn lessons. And part of my lesson was learning this, so that I could relay it to you in a manner in which you could understand it. And hopefully, that is what I am achieving here. Once you can understand that this is a voluntary experience and that there is lessons to learn here, some of the problems that people have with religion disappear. Right? Why does God allow bad things to happen? Because sometimes you need to learn sadness. You need to learn grief. You need to learn pain. Those things are outside of what God experiences, outside of us. Okay, back to the text. In the second chapter of Genesis begins the use of the name Yahweh, frequently in connection with that of the Elohim, Yahweh, Elohim. In the consideration of the name Yahweh, We have tried to present it as the embodiment of the idea of the universal spirit, the mind and will, which is the source of all life, mind, and action. Consequently, in the unity of the two divine names, Yahweh Elohim, is brought to light through the scriptures, and in cases too numerous to mention, the conception of the final attainment of man being the unity of his mind and will with the mind and will of God. Reasoning along this line of thought, we have come to the following conclusion. Yahweh, being the source of all life, of all mind, and of all action, spirit, man in his creation must have been formed of the substance of Yahweh, as Yahweh is the source of all that is. And not only is he the cause of all energy, but his infinite mind is the source of all order. And in order there must be a purpose, for without a purpose mind is in discord. Therefore, when Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness," that declared purpose necessarily embodied the thought of taking the Father and forming the Son. And while we have no authority in the Scriptures for the statement, we have reason to believe, from what has been said, that the Elohim were a body of men that, in the eons of time past, were created, even as we have been created, and that, having developed through all the experiences of an earthly life, they attained to the unity of their mind and will with the mind and will of their Creator. And as to the processes of evolution, development, there is no end. They have passed on in knowing the Father, Yahweh, becoming more and more like Him, until they have reached heights of attainment so far beyond the possibility of our conception that they have become the creators, preservers, and rulers, not of this earth alone, but probably of the whole solar system. Thus, they have become the embodiment and expression of Yahweh, and have a right to be called Yahweh Elohim. And when they said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness," they expressed the thought that man, their creation, must pass through all the experiences of an earth life, as they themselves had done, and that, in order to go on in his attainment to that likeness, he must turn his thought and aspiration towards Yahweh, and seek with all of his heart to be like him, in perfect harmony with the laws that gave him, man, existence, with the life of which he is the embodiment. When man has reached a point in his experience where, through knowledge, he is able to give free expression to the life that animates him, he will awaken to the realization that he is the embodiment of Yahweh, and in his unity with the body that is to be formed, see chapter entitled The Image of God, he becomes the image of Elohim. That is, as we shall have the occasion to say further on, the image spoken of by Elohim in Genesis 1:26. But not that of one man, but of a plurality of men. As the Spirit said by the apostles, speaking as by the Christ, "A body hast thou prepared for me, many members in one body, and all members in that body." See Romans 8:7. Consequently, the revelation of Elohim in material and spiritual form must necessarily be found in the revelation of the ultimation of the expressed purpose to make man in his image and like him. The revelation of this ultimate is brought to light by John the Anointed in his Apocalypse, chapters 1, 7, 9, 11, and 12. One fact, however, is clearly manifest, which is this: all life is of the substance of God, and as Yahweh is one, the one in which not only we, but all that lives, that is, lives, moves, and has its being, therefore the life of man is the same life on a lower plane. The theory of spiritual evolution, right? That's what he's talking about here. As that which animates Yahweh Elohim. Consequently, all are brethren, and this being true, the Elohim, through the person of the Lord Christ, called himself our brother. And the mighty angel who gave the revelation to John, and whose glory was so great that the beloved disciple fell down to worship him, said, "See thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren." While Elohim rightfully commands our highest love and admiration, and even veneration, yet our worship is of Yahweh. And in our prayers, when we feel the need of help, the real need of something, We ask Yahweh Elohim as our elder brother. No, I take it straight to God. I do not deal with the entities. No intermediaries necessary. Thank you. When we have come to know him, to have some idea of the depth of his love, of the grandeur of his nature, the tenderness of his brooding care for us, we approach him with a confidence that is born of boundless love alone. We feel the absolute assurance that we shall always have that which we desire, for while Elohim is so far beyond us and so incomprehensible to us, we must remember that we are his special care. No wonder that, by the prophet, he compared us to the apple of his eye, the strongest thought presentation possible. We know how sensitive the eye is and how much more carefully we preserve it from injury than any other member of the body. Such, then, is the loving care and protection extended over us by Yahweh Elohim. When, through loving devotion to God, our true relation to him begins to be the individual experience, then we shall be given to knowing God. No longer through belief, no longer by faith, we will apprehend God, but we shall know the Father, and the Father will reveal himself to us as he does not to the world. Again, I give testimony to that. Reveal himself to us not merely in thought, but we shall see his form, feel his mighty power, hear his words, and be fed from the limitless fountains of his love. I see my personal testimony for that. You, who would have additional evidence from the Scriptures relative to the truth presented in this chapter, we ask to follow the connection in which the word Elohim is used throughout the Scriptures, and also to its use in combination with the name Yahweh, Yahweh Elohim. We think enough has been said to give you a light to illumine your search in this direction. Some very satisfactory scriptural evidence as to the unity of the body of the Elohim has been given by Henry Proctor, MRASFRSL, in a paper which appeared in the American Antiquarian for January and February 1905. We quote, "When the great Moses Maimonides wrote the 13 Articles of the Jewish Faith, which gave an absolute sense to the unity of the Godhead, which before had been understood in a compound sense, he departed altogether from the teaching of the Hebrew Bible on this point. For it is certain that the unity so strongly affirmed there can be nothing else than a compound unity. And if we take these very words, which Jewish children are most carefully taught in order to guard them from believing in the Christian Trinity, vis-a-vis Shema Yisrael Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad, we find that even here it is certainly a compound unity that is expressed by the word Echad. 1. For this word is derived from the root Yachad, to unite, and occurs with a compound meaning hundreds of times in the Tanakh or Hebrew Bible, as in Numbers 8:23. A branch with one cluster of grapes equals many grapes in one cluster, a compound unity. In Judges 20:1, 8, and 11, the congregation assembled as one man. All the people arose as one man, knit together as one man. In all these passages, Echad denotes a compound unity, as also in Genesis 2:24, Basar Echad, one flesh. On the other hand, Yachid, which represents an absolute unity, as in Genesis 22:12 and 16, only son, Judges 11:34, only daughter, is never used to express the unity of God. And not only was Elohim used with plural signification, but Yahweh also in Genesis 11:7. As Yahweh said, let us go down and let us confound. And not only so, but the Messiah is distinctly affirmed to be the Son of Yahweh in Psalm 2:7. For in verse 7 he says to his Messiah, B'ni atah, my son thou art. In Proverbs 30:4, his son is again mentioned, and the earlier books abound with narratives of the visits of Melech Yahweh, who is recognized as being himself Yahweh, or as the Jews say, Adonai Elohim. I have to point out here, as I have pointed out many times in the Bible study, that It is necessary to go back and read the entirety of the proverb before you take it at any point of reference in anybody's literature. There are several points of contention in the New Testament referring to the Old Testament where they misquote it. In the New Testament, it is misattributed and misquoted and misinterpreted. It is intentional in my understanding in order to reinforce the control system of Christianity, which was being pulled out of whole cloth after the death of Christ. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, before you flame me, at least go back and see where I'm coming from. There are 161 videos talking about this kind of stuff. And so while this can be a true attribution, I'm not going to take the time to go back and read the Psalms and check. But often, whenever they attach the Psalms to Christ, it is entirely incorrect. Like in the context of which the Psalm was written. I'm just saying, you have to go back and look at it. In a fuller sense, the term Elohim included not only the Son, the Messiah, but also the angels. For in the 82nd Psalm, the supreme God is closely distinguished as Elion, the Most High, verse 6, and he is represented as standing in the congregation of the gods, in synagogue theon, and charging the angelic rulers of this world, that is, Satan and his angels, with folly. Again, in Psalm... my Roman numerals are not what they used to be. C is 100, X is 10, so 117 maybe? 9. Kal Elohim, all the gods, are commanded to worship the Messiah. This is rendered from the Septuagint in Hebrews 1:6, Pantes Aglio Theo, all the angels of God. In Psalm 8:5, a little lower than Elohim, is rendered Brok Ti Par Agelus, a little lower than angels. So that in the fuller concept of the Godhead, the Melachim, or Agaleoi, were included in one divine unity, so that the Christian idea of the Godhead is far nearer to that taught by Moses and in the whole Hebrew Tanakh than the Jewish conception of the present day. That is patently untrue. Patently untrue, and I am sorry if that steps on your toes, but I am not sorry if that steps on your toes. Go back, please, and do the Bible study before you come at me. I understand it is long. If you, in particular, watch the entire series, all 161 videos, I make almost $2, like it's between $1 and $2. It is not about monetary gain for me to refer you back to these. It is so that you will have the understanding before you come at me and be incorrect. Right? There is almost nothing in Christianity that is taught by Moses, and that is not to say that Moses was correct by any stretch of the imagination. I know, more toes. Delitzsch, in his Babel and Bible, says that the Old North Semitic tribes who settled in Babylon about B.C. 2500 worshipped Yahweh, the existing, enduring one, the one devoid of all change. I would have to see the references because that is almost certainly patently untrue too. And that this Yahweh was the spiritual possession of those same nomad tribes out of which, after 1,000 years, the Israelites were to emerge. This being they called El, that's closer, which means the goal, to which the eyes of man looking heavenward are turned, on whom hangs the gaze of every man. From this, he thought that the Hebrew idea of God was evolved. But this may be regarded as one evidence among many of the existence of a primeval worship of El Elyon, the supreme God, which has been identified with the Elu Suru of the Hammurabi. The biblical conception of God is sometimes stigmatized as anthropomorphic. It is, but this object is the outcome of ignorance. No, it's not. For although every appearance of celestial beings is described as being in the form of man, yet it is clear also that they believed in an omnipresent, all-pervading, all-sustaining spirit, corresponding to the teachings of Paul on Mars Hill, that He giveth to all life and breath and all things. For in him we live and move and have our being. And to that of John, that God is spirit, and that no man hath seen God at any time. That. So that the biblical conception of God is that of an all-pervading spirit. Yes, who is everywhere, fills all space, fills all things, is the life and intelligence of all things, and the motive power of all things, and that the Messiah and all his messengers are his offspring, sons of the Most High, B'nai Elyon, that all were called Elohim, but over them all the Messiah is supreme, and to him, as one with Elyon, the worship of all is due. I disagree with that. You don't have to, but I do. 4 reasons. The thought presented in this chapter regarding Yahweh Elohim will meet with the strongest prejudice arising in the preconceived ideas of long standing in the mind of the Christian world. Ideas which existed, as Professor Proctor says, among the early Semitic tribes. Because of constant touch with the lower races who worship the sun, moon, and stars, and the various forces of nature as so many gods, the earliest Semitic thinkers were necessarily driven to the opposite extreme. And in order to preserve their people from leaving the worship of Yahweh Elohim and uniting with the heathen around them in their worship of many gods, they were forced to keep ever before the mind of the people that their God was not divided into many gods, or messiahs, one warring against another, as were those of the heathen, but that he was a unity, one God. Therefore, as far back as we have any knowledge of it, there have been repeated in the Israelitish ritual the words, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God is one Yahweh. And also the words of the covenant, Thou shalt have no other gods before me, including a son of. Now that the great truth of the multiplicity and unity of the Godhead was known to the writers of the Bible, it is shown in every utterance in reference to the great name and in reference to the Elohim, and even in the most emphatic utterance, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh thy God is one Yahweh. It will be seen that the noun Elohim, God, retains a plural form, and that also a plurality in unity is expressed by the word Echad. But it may be argued that this is not alone a Jewish doctrine, for that it was also the doctrine of Christ. For according to Mark's Gospel, when asked which was the first commandment, he quoted the same words in reply. It is remarkable, however, that with the exception of Mark, none of the apostles gives this form to his reply to the question. Not to question Mark's memory in regard to this matter, the Christ well knew that for many centuries it would be necessary to guard people against the many gods of the heathen. And did he not well know the dark period through which his revelation must pass before the dawn of the eternal morning? See the unconventional gospel. Were this not true, he would not have told them that he had many things to tell them, but they were not ready to receive them then. Consequently, he made but little effort to reveal to his disciples the great mystery of the bringing together of a body of people and harmonizing them so that they became one body. Many members and all the members of that one body, all members essential to the constitution of that body. But he laid the foundation for this doctrine in the parable, wherein he said, I am the vine, ye are the branches. Now, you think that you can readily discern the governing law manifest here. Through the vine flows the same life-giving sap that nourishes all the branches. Being a member of the body of Yahweh Elohim, he frequently emphasized the thought, I can of mine own self do nothing, which was equivalent to saying, severed from the body of the Elohim, I have no power. In his last great prayer, John 27, he prayed for those who should believe on him, that they might be one, as he and the Father were one. I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one. Here, in most unmistakable terms, is expressed multiplicity and unity, not only in the body of his believers, but also in the body of the Elohim, which he called his Father. Bear in mind the words, that they may be one, even as we are one, in the same way. This is unmistakable language. And yet y'all continue to mistake it. But we will not extend the argument. While a multitude of texts might be quoted from the scripture to show that what has been said is indubitably a truth, we know how futile the argument is, and realizing the force of the words of the Christ, we rest in those truths upon them. He that is of God heareth God's words. Footnotes, we're not going to read those. Like it's just references to scripture. And so that is going to begin our wrap up of this. I know that I have some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those beliefs, and it is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. Christ told you, as recorded in his own words through the various propaganda, which are the books, that he was just a man. He was on God's will, absolutely. He was willing to do the things God asked of him, absolutely. But he told you repeatedly, all of these things that I can do, you can do as well, and more. If you have but faith the size of a mustard seed, you can cast the mountain into the sea. Through your faith you are healed. There are so many references to him saying quite explicitly that he was here as a mortal, not necessarily through divine intervention. That is a whole thing. And so it is important to note, this is something that I point out quite often in the Bible study, and it is something that you need to bear in mind. They were forming a religion. They were forming a religion, and you don't necessarily have to like that, but you believe it. You believe that they were forming Christianity, that they were revealing the correct way to go. They believe that too. I honestly believe that, even though I believe that they were misguided in their application of it. I think that Jesus taught them one thing and that they went and did a whole different thing. Each of the Gospels is geared towards a specific set of people. Right? Matthew was for the people in Turkey, whereas Mark was for the people in Ethiopia. Luke was for the people in Egypt. And I'm pretty sure I got those attributions right, but it was those three areas, even if I got the names of the people wrong. Now, John was his own thing. John has fanatic impulses, and he has a tendency to over-embellish, both in his gospel and in the Revelation. And that is another whole study that we have already done, so we're not going to rehash it here. Most of the references referring to Jesus being born of a virgin are taken completely out of context. That is not in the Old Testament. The overcoming the whole situation that happened and nailing to the cross, all of those things are not in the Old Testament. They are self-insertions into the Old Testament by people trying to form a religion. I'm not saying that they were wrong in doing so. When Judaism was formed, it was to raise the Jewish people up out of the surrounding people, even though there probably was not necessarily a Jewish people. Also in the Bible study. And so they were attempting to do something, and it was successful. They became better, and they formed a nation, and they were, for a little while, like a very, 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 very little while, able to do the things in which they were purporting to do. The same is true with the gospel, right? It was showing a different way. I believe that Jesus came to put an end to the blood sacrifice because I emphatically believe that the blood sacrifice was evil, right? Like directly evil. Serving the wrong entities. I've explained that in great detail also in the Bible study. And that he was coming and saying, hey, this isn't a necessary thing. What you need to do is turn to God. When he asked him how to pray, he said, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the power, the glory, and the holiness forever, right? That is how Jesus told you to pray. He never said to pray in his name. Not once. He never told you to venerate him as a god. He didn't do it. What he said was, serve the Lord my Father. They got mad at him for saying that God was his Father. They got mad at him for saying that he was a representative thereof. But I believe that we are all representatives of God. We are all meant to walk in correctness. That does not mean sin-free. I know that's going to set off a whole different group of people, but there are 7 virtues and there are 7 vices. They are a balancing point, right? You are supposed to find the balance in them. You're not supposed to be completely abstinent, but you are not supposed to be consumed by the lust of the flesh. You are meant to be in union with one person and create life and nurture that life, because that is your goal. You are not meant to never take a drink, but you're not meant to be drunk. You're meant to find the balance and to enjoy yourself. Take the time to actually enjoy the chemicals. But don't become dependent on the chemicals. Don't spend your whole day searching for the chemicals. Don't let the chemicals become the reason why you do not do the things you are supposed to do. Right? It is a balance that you are meant to find. I believe that that has been the purpose of every single enlightened person, right? And they may have misinterpreted it in some cases. You're not meant to be living on top of a mountain somewhere isolated from humanity. You are meant to be among people. You're not meant to spend your days just contemplating. You're meant to toil. There are very real reasons for that. It gives your life purpose and meaning. It sets the direction in which you are meant to go. It keeps you from becoming depressive. It keeps you from going to the extremes of either the virtues or the vice. You can overtake a virtue. Celibacy is not something to be celebrated. It's not. Giving away everything that you own is not something to be celebrated. It is not the point of this life to give away everything, but you're not meant to hoard everything either. There is a balance, and you are meant to walk in the balance. You are meant to be in the balance. You are meant to be a direct representative of God's will. God's will is for you to work hard and be productive. Go forth. Subdue the earth and be stewards thereof. Shed no blood of man. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is the whole of the law for a reason. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I probably stepped on enough toes. I don't need to step on any more, right? Once again, I have 161 videos in my Bible study where I go through and talk about this. We do word studies on what was actually meant, and this is not necessarily it. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. And I do claim a little bit more knowledge in this than most people have. You don't have to believe me. I'm not here to convince you. I am here to tell you. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. As long as it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks, because I am not manifesting money. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.